Dear students, today we are going to highlight Akbar's annexationist policy, how he conquered Deccan, North West and Gujarat. As you all know, he was the greatest ruler of the Mughal India and also one of the best rulers of the Indian subcontinent if we compare him with the other rulers like Ashoka, Kanishka, Shumudragupta and all. Akbar was a person who was famous for his knowledge, who, though he was not at all an educated person, but his love for his people and also how he tried to shape up the Mughal Empire is worth of appreciation. Akbar's religious policy was one of the greatest chapters of medieval Indian history. Apart from his religious policy, his Rajput policy, that means how he dealt with the Rajputs, also deserve special mention. His policy of annexations, that means how he tried to conquer the different parts of the Indian subcontinent, also attract the researchers since a long time. Today, we will be highlighting how he tried to conquer Deccan, North West and Gujarat with his shrewd diplomacy as well as with his military expertise. Dear students, it's very important for us to know the sources from which we have come to acquire knowledge about Akbar's reign or regime. Here our main source is Ain-e-Akbari by Abul Fazl. Apart from Ain-e-Akbari, the writings of the Persian historians, the accounts of the Jesuit missionaries, the writings of the European historians, and also the foreign traders who visited Akbar's court, they provided important and valuable deeds to know about who was Akbar, how was his regime, how he treated with his subjects, what were his policies. Later on, we find many more researches on Akbar. In this regard, I must mention the name of Vincent Smith, who wrote a very important book on Akbar, which was published in the year 1917. Two English pioneer merchants who visited Akbar's court, Ralph Fitch in 1585 and John Mildenhall 20 years later, have left a few brief notes. When we come to later time, the most important European book is Todd's Annals of Rajasthan, which preserves many traditions not available elsewhere and gives an estimate of Akbar's character and deeds as seen from the Rajput point of view. It is a book to be used with critical caution, as mentioned by historian Vincent Smith. Apart from the writings of the European historians, the writings of the Indian historians also deserve special mention. I would like to mention the names of Professor R.C. Majumdar, Professor Satish Chandra and others who wrote on Akbar. Dear students, it's very important for us to know these primary sources to have a complete picture about his reign and also to assess his character and achievements. Akbar was a foreigner. He was one of the descendants of Timur and Genghis Khan. He was highly influenced by the Iranian culture as well as by the Turkish culture and the Mongol traditions. Later on, he was highly influenced with the Hindu religion as well as by the Christianity. As we all know, apart from his shrewd diplomacy and his policy of annexations, he was highly praised for his religious policy. Perhaps his route in Central Asia and also later on how he was influenced by his Rajput wives helped him to have his independent ideas about religion as well as about the culture and heritage of his country. That means where he started ruling Hindustan. When Akbar got the throne from his father Humayun, he was a minor. He was under the guardianship of Bairam Khan for a long time. When he got the throne from his father, that time he got Delhi, Agra and Punjab, as his father conquered all those regions. During the regency of Bairam Khan, Ajmer, Gwalior and Jaunpur were annexed. When Akbar took all the powers in his hand, he wanted to have an independent status, not only in regard of administration, also in regard of expanding the frontiers of his kingdom, which was that time not at all an empire in its true sense. In other words, it is important to highlight through his policy of annexations, he expanded the frontiers of his empire or kingdom and also tried to win over the hearts of his people. But according to the historians, it was not at all the brainchild of Akbar to conquer the whole of India. He was highly influenced with the ideals and by the strategic policies of Sher Shah, who ruled just for 5 years and established the Sur dynasty. As we have already discussed about Sher Shah, that how Sher Shah dethroned Humayun and how Humayun recaptured his empire. But when we are talking about Akbar, here also Sher Shah deserves special mention. It is very much significant to point out that Akbar, in his regime, where he was as a conqueror for 40 years, started from the expedition against Malwa in 1561 and ended with the fall of Asirgarh in 1601, was guided with the ideals of Sher Shah, or in other words, followed his footsteps. Akbar himself put his ideal as a conqueror in the following words. I quote, "A monarch should be ever intent on conquest, otherwise his enemies rise in rebellion against him." Dear students, now we will highlight the points by which we would try to revisit the history of Akbar's annexationist policy with special emphasis on Gujarat. After conquering Malwa and Rajasthan, Akbar proceeded towards Gujrat. During that time, Gujrat was a very famous city known for trade and commerce. There were 2 important ports which were important for overseas trade. They were Surat and Cambay. Through the ports of Gujarat, the pilgrims during that time used to visit the holy places in Arabia and also in Mecca. If we analyze the political situation in Gujarat before the invasion of Akbar, then it's evident that after the death of Bahadur Shah in 1537, Gujarat had no able ruler who could challenge the invaders or the attackers. The nobles, they became very powerful. They took the advantage of the situation and also they played an important role and became the kingmakers. How they played the important role? They were very much instrumental in administration as well as they influenced the rulers to a great extent. In this anarchical situation, Akbar was invited by the nobles of Gujarat to take up the matters in his hand. Akbar from Fatehpur Sikri, which was the capital of his empire, he marched towards Ahmednagar and Muzaffar Shah III submitted his loyalty to him. Then Akbar went to Cambay, the famous port in Gujarat, and met the foreign merchants over there, especially the Portuguese merchants. In the meantime, the Mirzas, they seized a considerable part of Gujarat. Akbar from Cambay, he returned and he defeated the Mirzas at the Battle of Sarmal, which took place in the year 1572. The victory was followed by the siege of Surat in 1573. That time, Akbar found a small Portuguese troop sent by the Viceroy of Goa to help the Mirzas. But this troop played the role of a key factor to initiate a treaty between the Mughal emperor and the Viceroy of Goa. As a result of this treaty, the pilgrims, they got some privileges for their journey towards Mecca. After that, a fresh rebellion broke out in Gujarat in 1573. Meanwhile, Akbar returned to Fatehpur Sikri, but when he heard the news of a fresh rebellion, and he again came back and achieved a complete victory, which was regarded or which was acclaimed as the quickest victory in the Mughal Indian history. After this, Akbar completed his victory of Gujarat and started thinking to expand his empire or the frontiers of his kingdom to the other parts of the Indian subcontinent. After that, as I have already mentioned, Gujarat became a part of the Mughal India. Here Todarmal, he played a very important role of restructuring the finances as well as the revenue administration. From Gujarat, the Mughals, they started earning a huge amount of money. Definitely, annexation of Gujarat was beneficial for the Mughal rulers. Definitely, the conquest of Gujarat made Akbar one of the greatest rulers of Mughal India, who was not only famous for his annexation but also for his ideals and thoughts, which made him different and exceptional in regard of benevolent ideas. Now we will discuss about how Akbar he conquered Deccan. There were a number of factors which were responsible for this mission. He was very much interested to acquire the wealth of South India, as well as he was almost successful to conquer the North India. So definitely he wanted to expand the wings of his empire, and he started thinking to conquer Deccan. He was also worried about the fact that how the Portuguese traders, they were trying to influence the Deccan sultans. So definitely to subdue this kind of influence and to establish his own supremacy over the sultans of Deccan, he took this particular policy of annexation with special emphasis to the states or to the kingdoms of South India. Of the 5 offshoots of the Bahmani Empire, Akbar was concerned about Ahmednagar, Bijapur and Golconda only. Berar had been annexed by Ahmednagar in 1574 and Bidar was too insignificant to attract his attention. Besides, there was the Faruqi kingdom of Khandesh, which was the outpost of the Mughal invasion into the south and geographically the neighbor of the Mughal Empire. In 1591, 4 Mughal embassies were sent to the sultans of Khandesh, Bijapur, Golconda and Ahmednagar to accept Mughal suzerainty. Amongst these sultans, Sultan Raja Ali Khan of Khandesh agreed to submit his loyalty. The events took a dramatic turn subsequently. After the death of Sultan Burhan Nizam Shah of Ahmednagar, there was a dispute about succession in which Chand Sultana, widow of Ali Adil Shah I of Bijapur, championed the cause of the lawful heir Bahadur, who was an infant, but a group of nobles imprisoned him and elevated another candidate to the throne. These dissensions offered Akbar an excellent opportunity for the conquest of Ahmednagar. Following an imperial expedition led by Akbar's second son Murad against Ahmednagar in 1595, Chand Sultana ceded Berar to the Mughals. But the peace thus concluded proved a mere truce and led to fresh Mughal expeditions against Ahmednagar in 1597 and 1599, when Akbar himself supervised the siege of Ahmednagar. As a result of this campaign, the Mughals placed the capital city and the adjoining territories under their administrative control. But a large part of the kingdom remained in possession of influential Nizam Shahi nobles, particularly Malik Ambar. In 1601, the fort of Asirgarh was captured and Khandesh was annexed to the Mughal Empire. Ultimately, Khandesh, Berar and the annexed portion of Ahmednagar were combined as the viceroyalty of the Deccan and placed under Prince Daniel. Asirgarh proved to be the last conquest of Akbar's life. He intended to deal with the kingdoms of Bijapur, Golconda and Bidar, but he had to leave the Deccan for the north where Prince Salim had revolted. Dear students, now we will be discussing that how Akbar conquered the northwest frontier. The year 1581 was definitely one of the crucial years in Akbar's life. That time, his half-brother and also the ruler of Kabul, Muhammad Hakim, he proceeded towards Lahore. Akbar defeated his half-brother, but he reinstated him. In the year 1586, Muhammad Hakim died and his entire kingdom, that means Kabul, was annexed by the Mughals. After the conquest of Kabul, it was very important for the Mughals to suppress the tribes which were situating between Punjab and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, Raja Birbal was killed when he was trying to suppress the tribes, namely Mandar and Yusufzai. Akbar, he gave pensions to the tribal leaders to gain or to achieve their loyalty. In the year 1586, Kashmir was annexed by the Mughals, and in 1593, the whole of the Sindh was conquered by the Mughals, which was considered as a prelude to their expedition to Kandahar. The year 1595 saw the completion of the conquests and annexations in the northwest, affected by the atrocity of Akbar's officers or through diplomacy, based on the terror on his time. A little later, in April, Kandahar itself came into Akbar's possession without bloodshed. In the conclusion, we would like to say that as we have discussed in this lecture, that how Akbar conquered Gujarat, Deccan and northwest frontier, and these expeditions were not very smooth for him. Somewhere he had to be diplomatic, somewhere he had to show his military power, or somewhere he tried to solve the matters by showing mercy, which after all not worked all the time. Dear students, it's very important for us to reassess Akbar's caliber and also his military expertise in the light of these expeditions as we have discussed now. It was not only Akbar but his courtiers as well as his ministers, they played a very important role behind his success. Lastly, the great ruler or the great conqueror, Akbar, was not at all had a very stable life in the last days of his empire. He had to see how his son Selim revolted against him. That time, the entire Mughal court was divided into two groups. One was led by the supporters of Selim and the other was supported by those who wanted Khusru to become the next Mughal ruler. But before his death, Akbar himself nominated Selim as his heir, and Selim, by taking the name of Jahangir, he got the throne after Akbar.